Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Louisa's heart raced as she gazed at her reflection in the rearview mirror. The face staring back still felt foreign sometimes, carefully applied makeup accentuating features that were usually hidden away. She adjusted a stray lock of the chestnut brown wig, making sure it framed her face just right. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, smoothing down the fabric of her navy blue dress, the result of hours spent researching the best ways to create a feminine silhouette. Black heels completed the look. Not too high, she didn't want to risk tripping. With trembling hands, Louisa gathered her purse and overnight bag from the passenger seat. The weight of the makeup and extra clothes inside felt like an anchor, grounding her in this moment. This was only her second time going out fully dressed as Louisa, the woman she knew herself to be deep down. The first time had been a blur of nerves and excitement. Tonight felt different, more real somehow. The invitation from Pearl had come as a surprise. They'd met online in a support group for transgender women and hit it off immediately. Pearl's bubbly personality and infectious enthusiasm had been a lifeline during some of Louisa's darkest moments of self-doubt. When Pearl suggested a girls' night out with some other friends, Louisa's initial instinct had been to decline. But something made her pause before hitting send on that message. Maybe it was time to take another step forward. Now here she was, about to spend an entire evening as her true self. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. What if someone saw through her carefully constructed appearance? What if she said or did something to give herself away? "Stop it," Louisa muttered, shaking her head to dispel the doubts creeping in. She'd spent weeks planning for this night, choosing the perfect outfit, practicing her makeup, even working on softening her voice. She deserved to enjoy herself. Taking one last steadying breath, Louisa stepped out of the car. The click of her heels on the pavement sent a thrill through her. This was really happening. She made her way to the hotel entrance, focusing on keeping her steps smooth and natural. The lobby was mercifully quiet as Louisa approached the front desk. The young woman working there barely glanced up from her computer as she asked, "Checking in?" "Yes, under the name Louisa Thompson," she replied, proud of how steady her voice sounded. A few clicks of the keyboard and the receptionist handed over a key card. "Room 317. Elevator's just around the corner. Enjoy your stay." Louisa murmured her thanks, relief washing over her. First hurdle cleared, she made her way to the elevator, hyper-aware of her movements. The doors had barely closed behind her when her phone buzzed with a text from Pearl. "We're in room 320. Can't wait to see you, girl." A smile tugged at Louisa's lips. Pearl's enthusiasm was contagious, even through a text message. As the elevator climbed, Louisa allowed herself to feel a flicker of excitement. This was going to be fun. The hallway on the third floor was deserted as Louisa made her way to her room. She had just finished unpacking when another text from Pearl arrived. "Come over whenever you're ready. Julia's here too." Louisa's breath caught. She remembered Julia from their first outing, tall, confident, with a wicked sense of humor. Julia had been living full-time as a woman for years and carried herself with an ease Louisa could only dream of. After a final check in the mirror and a spritz of perfume, Louisa gathered her courage and stepped into the hallway. The few steps to room 320 felt like miles. She raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. Was this a mistake? Maybe she should just go back to her room, make up some excuse. Before she could follow through on that impulse, the door swung open. Pearl stood there, resplendent in a sparkly gold dress. Her face lit up at the sight of Louisa. "There you are!" Pearl exclaimed, pulling Louisa into a warm hug. Come in! You look amazing!" Louisa felt herself relax as she stepped into the room. Julia lounged on one of the beds, looking effortlessly glamorous in a red cocktail dress. She raised her glass in greeting. Well, look who decided to join the party," Julia drawled with a wink. Glad you made it, hun." Pearl bustled around, pouring Louisa a glass of wine. "We were just discussing our game plan for the evening. I thought we'd start with drinks at the hotel bar, then hit up that new pub down the street. After that, who knows? The night is young." Louisa sipped her wine, feeling the alcohol help loosen some of her tension. As Pearl and Julia chatted, she found herself drawn into their easy banter. These women understood her in a way no one else could. They'd walked the same path, faced the same fears and doubts. Before long, it was time to head down to the bar. Louisa's nerves flared up again as they stepped into the elevator. "You've got this," Julia murmured, giving Louisa's hand a quick squeeze. "Just remember, confidence is key. Act like you belong, and no one will question it." The hotel bar was busy, but not packed as they made their entrance. Louisa kept her chin up, mimicking Julia's confident stride. They found a table in the corner and ordered a round of cocktails. As the night progressed, Louisa felt herself slowly unwinding. The constant fear of being clocked as transgender began to fade into the background. She laughed at Pearl's outrageous stories and found herself sharing some of her own experiences. "And then my neighbor asked if I was having a costume party," Louisa finished, giggling at the memory of frantically hiding her wig and makeup when an unexpected visitor showed up. Julia raised her glass in a toast. "To costume parties that never end," she said with a wry smile. They all clinked glasses, a shared understanding passing between them. After a couple of hours and several cocktails, Pearl declared it was time to move on to the next venue. They gathered their things and headed out into the cool night air. Louisa felt a moment of panic as they stepped onto the busy sidewalk, but Pearl linked arms with her, chattering away about the pub they were heading to. The pub was crowded and noisy, with music blaring from speakers overhead. They squeezed their way to the bar, where Julia somehow managed to catch the bartender's attention immediately. "3 gin and tonics, please," she called out over the din. "And put it on my tab." Louisa started to protest, but Julia waved her off. "My treat tonight, girls. Let's just focus on having fun." They found a small table in the corner and settled in with their drinks. Louisa found herself relaxing more and more as the night went on. She even worked up the courage to use the women's restroom, heart pounding as she touched up her lipstick in the mirror. As they left the pub, Pearl linked arms with Louisa again. "Having fun?" she asked, a hint of concern in her voice. Louisa nodded emphatically. "More than I ever thought possible," she admitted. "Thank you for inviting me out tonight." Pearl beamed. "That's what friends are for! Now who's ready to hit the dance floor?" The nightclub Pearl led them to was unlike anywhere Louisa had ever been. Rainbow flags adorned the walls, and the crowd was a diverse mix of people across the gender spectrum. For the first time that night, Louisa felt completely at ease. They made their way to the bar, where Julia once again took charge of ordering. 3 shots of tequila to start," she declared. "We're celebrating tonight." Louisa hesitated, but Pearl nudged her encouragingly. "Come on, live a little." The tequila burned going down, but Louisa found she didn't mind. A pleasant warmth spread through her body as the music pulsed around them. Before she knew it, Pearl was dragging her onto the dance floor. "I don't really know how to dance," Louisa shouted over the music. Pearl laughed. "Just move to the beat. No one's judging here." Louisa closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. She swayed her hips, feeling freer than she ever had before. This was what it felt like to truly be herself, surrounded by people who understood and accepted her. The night became a blur of dancing, laughter, and more drinks. At some point, a handsome man asked Louisa to dance. Her heart raced as she accepted, thrilled at being seen as just another woman on the dance floor. As the club began to wind down in the early hours of the morning, the 3 friends stumbled out onto the street, giddy with exhaustion and alcohol. They leaned on each other for support as they made their way back to the hotel, recounting the highlights of the night. "Did you see that guy checking you out?" Pearl teased Louisa. "I told you that dress was a knockout." Louisa blushed, remembering the way the man's eyes had lingered on her. It was a new and intoxicating feeling. Back at the hotel, they piled into Pearl and Julia's room for a nightcap. Louisa kicked off her heels with a groan of relief, massaging her aching feet. "Amateur," Julia laughed, somehow still looking perfectly put together despite the long night. "You'll build up calluses eventually." As they sipped their drinks, a comfortable silence fell over the room. Louisa felt a lump form in her throat as she looked at her friends. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I never thought I'd be brave enough to do something like this." Pearl reached over and squeezed her hand. "You were always brave, honey. You just needed a little push to see it yourself." Julia raised her glass. "To Louisa," she said solemnly. "May this be the first of many nights living as your true self." They clinked glasses one last time before saying their goodnights. As Louisa made her way back to her own room, she felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in her life, everything felt right. She carefully removed her makeup and wig, storing them away for the journey home tomorrow. But as she crawled into bed, Louisa knew that this was just the beginning. She had taken another step forward on her journey, and there was no going back now. With a contented sigh, Louisa drifted off to sleep, dreaming of the life that was finally within reach. The next morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the gaps in the hotel curtains. Louisa stirred, momentarily disoriented by her surroundings. As the memories of the previous night came flooding back, a smile spread across her face. She stretched languidly, relishing the feeling of silk pajamas against her skin. Even in private moments like this, Louisa cherished the little things that affirmed her identity. She allowed herself a few more minutes to bask in the afterglow of the night's adventures before reluctantly sitting up. A glance at her phone showed several messages from Pearl and Julia, along with a couple of friend requests from people they'd met at the club. Louisa felt a warm glow of acceptance as she scrolled through them. As she began the process of getting ready for the day, Louisa caught sight of herself in the mirror. Without the wig and makeup, she could see traces of her old self peeking through. But instead of the usual dysphoria, she felt a strange sense of integration. This was all part of her journey. A knock at the door interrupted her musings. "Room service!" a cheerful voice called out. Louisa froze. She hadn't ordered anything. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm her. But then she remembered Julia's words from the night before. Confidence is key. Taking a deep breath, Louisa opened the door with as much poise as she could muster. A young woman stood there with a covered tray. "Good morning, ma'am," the server said brightly. "Compliments of your friends in room 320. They said to tell you, hair of the dog that bit you." Louisa couldn't help but laugh. Of course, Pearl and Julia would think of this. She thanked the server and brought the tray inside, lifting the cover to reveal a full breakfast spread complete with a Bloody Mary. As she sipped the spicy cocktail and nibbled on toast, Louisa's phone buzzed with a new message from Pearl. "Hope you're not too hungover. Meet us in the lobby at 11. For brunch?" Guys, Louisa glanced at the clock. That gave her just enough time to eat, shower, and get ready. She felt a flutter of excitement at the prospect of another outing as herself. The process of transforming back into Louisa was easier this time, muscle memory taking over as she applied her makeup and styled her wig. She chose a more casual outfit for daytime, a flowy floral blouse paired with dark skinny jeans and low heels. As she made her final adjustments in the mirror, Louisa marveled at how natural it all felt now. The woman staring back at her was no longer a stranger or a costume. This was simply who she was meant to be. With a final spritz of perfume, Louisa gathered her things and headed down to the lobby. Pearl and Julia were already there, looking fresh-faced despite the late night. "There's our sleeping beauty," Pearl called out, waving enthusiastically. Julia gave Louisa an appraising look. "Not bad for a rookie," she said with a wink. Ready for round 2? Louisa nodded, feeling a surge of confidence. Bring it on, she replied with a grin. The 3 friends linked arms as they stepped out into the bright Sunday morning. The streets were quieter now, families and couples out for leisurely strolls. Louisa held her head high, no longer consumed by the fear of being noticed or judged. They found a charming cafe with outdoor seating, settling in to enjoy the sunshine. As they perused the menus, the waiter approached their table. "Good morning, ladies," he said with a warm smile. "Can I start you off with some coffee?" Louisa's heart soared at being casually included in that greeting. She ordered her coffee with a steady voice, reveling in the simple normalcy of the interaction. As they waited for their food, the conversation flowed easily. They recounted funny moments from the night before and shared stories of their own journeys. Louisa found herself opening up more than she ever had before, feeling safe and understood in the company of her friends. "So, what's next for you?" Julia asked between bites of her Eggs Benedict. "Any big plans on the horizon?" Louisa hesitated. She'd been thinking about this a lot lately, but hadn't voiced her thoughts to anyone yet. "Actually," she began slowly, "I've been considering coming out at work." Pearl squealed with excitement, drawing curious looks from nearby tables. "That's amazing." "Oh, honey, I'm so proud of you for even thinking about it," Julia nodded approvingly. "It's a big step, but it can be incredibly liberating. Just make sure you have a solid support system in place." Louisa felt a weight lift off her shoulders as she shared her tentative plans. Pearl and Julia offered advice and encouragement, drawing from their own experiences. By the time they finished their meal, Louisa felt more confident than ever about her path forward. As they prepared to go their separate ways, there were hugs and promises to stay in touch. Louisa felt a pang of sadness at the thought of returning to her everyday life, where she still presented as male most of the time. "Remember," Julia said, squeezing Louisa's hand, "you're always Louisa, no matter what you're wearing or how you look on the outside. Don't let anyone make you feel like you have to hide who you are." Pearl nodded in agreement. "And don't be a stranger. We'll plan another girls' night soon, okay?" Louisa blinked back tears as she hugged her friends goodbye. The weekend had been transformative in ways she never could have imagined. She felt stronger, more self-assured, and ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. As she drove home, Louisa's mind was already racing with plans. She'd need to talk to HR, research her company's policies, maybe even look into finding a therapist who specialized in gender identity issues. But for the first time, these tasks didn't feel overwhelming. They were just the next steps on her journey. Louisa caught sight of herself in the rearview mirror as she pulled into her driveway. The wig and makeup were still in place, a visual reminder of the incredible weekend she'd just experienced. But even as she prepared to change back into her male persona for now, Louisa knew that something fundamental had shifted inside her. She was Louisa Thompson, and she was finally ready to show the world her true self. As the days turned into weeks following that transformative weekend, Louisa found herself riding a wave of newfound confidence. The memories of her night out with Pearl and Julia served as a constant source of strength, reminding her of who she truly was, even when she had to present as male at work or in other aspects of her daily life. She began taking small steps towards living more authentically. Online shopping became a secret joy, carefully selecting items that could pass as unisex or be easily hidden. A growing collection of makeup and accessories found their way into a locked drawer in her bedroom. Louisa also threw herself into research, devouring every bit of information she could find about the process of transitioning. She joined online support groups, connecting with others who were at various stages of their journeys. The sense of community she found there was invaluable, providing both practical advice and emotional support. As her confidence grew, so did her determination to take the next big step, coming out at work. Louisa spent weeks agonizing over how to approach the subject, drafting and redrafting emails to her supervisor and HR department. Finally, on a morning, Louisa took a deep breath and hit send on the carefully worded message requesting a meeting to discuss her gender identity. The wait for a response felt interminable, each ping of her inbox sending her heart racing. When the reply finally came, it was brief but encouraging. Her supervisor and an HR representative would be happy to meet with her the following week to discuss any accommodations or support she might need. The day of the meeting arrived, and Louisa found herself standing in front of her closet, paralyzed with indecision. Should she present as female for the first time at work? Or ease into it more gradually? In the end, she opted for a compromise, subtle makeup, a feminine blouse under a blazer, and her usual work slacks. As she entered the conference room, Louisa's hands were shaking, but the warm smiles from her supervisor and the HR rep helped ease some of her tension. "Thank you for meeting with me," Louisa began, her voice trembling slightly. "I wanted to discuss, well, I'm transgender. I've been living as a woman in my personal life, and I'd like to begin transitioning at work as well." What followed was a conversation filled with questions, reassurances, and plans for moving forward. Louisa was surprised and relieved by how supportive they were, offering resources and asking how they could best assist her in this process. As the meeting concluded, her supervisor reached out to shake her hand.
"Thank you for trusting us with this, Louisa," he said warmly. "We're here to support you every step of the way." Louisa left the office that day feeling as though an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She immediately texted Pearl and Julia to share the news, their excited responses bringing tears to her eyes. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. Louisa worked with HR to craft an email announcement to her colleagues, explaining her transition and requesting that they use her new name and pronouns. She was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support from her coworkers, many of whom went out of their way to make her feel welcome and accepted. There were challenges, of course. Some colleagues struggled with the change, stumbling over pronouns or accidentally using her dead name. But Louisa found that most people were genuinely trying their best, and she learned to be patient with the process. As she settled into her new identity at work, Louisa felt emboldened to take on other aspects of her life. She began the process of legally changing her name and gender marker, navigating the complex web of paperwork and court appearances. She also started seeing a therapist who specialized in gender identity issues, working through years of repressed emotions and internalized transphobia. It was hard work, often leaving her emotionally drained, but Louisa could feel herself growing stronger with each session. Throughout it all, Pearl and Julia remained steadfast supporters. They celebrated each milestone with her, offering advice and encouragement when things got tough. Louisa found herself becoming more involved in the local transgender community, even volunteering to speak at support group meetings to share her experiences. As the months passed, Louisa's external appearance began to match the woman she'd always known herself to be. Hormone therapy softened her features and redistributed her body fat, while laser hair removal helped eliminate the constant battle with facial hair. Shopping for clothes became an adventure rather than a source of anxiety. Louisa reveled in the ability to express herself through fashion, experimenting with different styles to find what made her feel most like herself. 1 year to the day after that first girls' night out, Louisa found herself getting ready for another evening with Pearl and Julia. As she applied her makeup, a skill she'd honed to near perfection by now, Louisa barely recognized the person staring back at her in the mirror. Gone was the nervous, hesitant person who had second-guessed every movement. In her place stood a confident woman, comfortable in her own skin and ready to take on the world. Louisa smiled at her reflection, marveling at how far she'd come. The journey wasn't over in many ways, it was just beginning. But for the first time in her life, Louisa felt truly, completely herself. As she headed out to meet her friends, Louisa's heart was full of gratitude for the path that had led her here. She thought of all the people who had supported her along the way. Pearl and Julia, her co-workers, her therapist, and countless others in the transgender community who had shared their wisdom and experiences.
But most of all, Louisa was proud of herself. Proud of the courage it had taken to embrace her true identity, proud of the strength she'd shown in facing every obstacle. She was Louisa Thompson, and she was finally living the life she was meant to live. The night ahead promised new adventures and memories to be made. But whatever came next, Louisa knew she was ready to face it, head held high, confident in who she was, and surrounded by people who loved and accepted her for her authentic self. As Louisa stepped out into the cool evening air, she took a moment to appreciate how far she'd come. The woman who had nervously approached that hotel a year ago felt like a distant memory. Now she walked with purpose, her heels clicking confidently on the pavement. She arrived at the restaurant where they'd agreed to meet, spotting Pearl and Julia already seated at a table on the outdoor patio. As she approached, both women stood to greet her with warm hugs and excited chatter. "Look at you, girl!" Pearl exclaimed, holding Louisa at arm's length to admire her outfit, a sleek black dress. "You're absolutely glowing!" Julia nodded in agreement. "Our little butterfly has fully emerged from her cocoon," she said with a wink. "I think this calls for a toast." They settled into their seats as a waiter approached to take their drink orders. Louisa couldn't help but smile as she remembered how nervous she'd been during their first outing, constantly worried about her voice or mannerisms giving her away. Now she chatted easily with the waiter, not giving it a second thought. As they sipped their cocktails and perused the menu, the conversation flowed freely. They caught up on each other's lives, sharing triumphs and challenges from the past year. "So, any exciting developments in the romance department?" Pearl asked with a mischievous grin. "You mentioned there was a cute guy in accounting who's been extra friendly lately." Louisa felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Oh, it's nothing serious," she demurred. "We've just been getting coffee together during breaks. I'm not even sure if he knows I'm trans." Julia leaned in, her expression turning serious. "And how do you feel about that? Are you planning to tell him?" Louisa sighed, twirling the stem of her wine glass between her fingers. "I've been thinking about it a lot," she admitted. "Part of me wants to just enjoy being treated like any other woman, but I also know that honesty is important in any relationship, even if it's just a friendship." Pearl reached out to squeeze her hand. "There's no rush, honey. You'll know when the time is right to have that conversation." As their meals arrived, the topic shifted to lighter subjects. They laughed over memories from their nights out, marveling at how much had changed in just a year. "Remember when you couldn't walk in heels without wobbling?" Julia teased. "Now look at you, strutting around like you were born in them." Louisa grinned, extending her leg to show off her stilettos. "Practice makes perfect," she said with a wink. "Though I still prefer flats for everyday wear." As the evening wore on, Louisa found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought of the countless small victories along the way. The first time she'd been gendered correctly by a stranger, the day she finally mastered winged eyeliner, the moment she realized she no longer flinched at the sound of her own voice. But more than anything, she was grateful for the friendship and support that had made it all possible. Pearl and Julia had been there from the beginning, offering guidance, encouragement, and a shoulder to cry on when things got tough. As they finished their desserts, Louisa raised her glass. "I just want to say thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I wouldn't be where I am today without you two. You've been more than friends. You've been my sisters, my mentors, my cheerleaders. I don't know how I can ever repay you for everything you've done." Pearl's eyes welled up with tears. "Oh, honey, you don't have to repay us for anything. Watching you blossom into the amazing woman you are has been reward enough." Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.